unification of MarTech infrastructure is incredibly important. We have our core site, we have multiple sites for our sister products that all feed into each other. We have the CRM, we have all our social media channels, and those extend into student-specific chatboards that are very important to us.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy, leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. Got a slightly different episode today. We're talking to a highly experienced e-commerce person, someone I've known for many years. But we're looking at the insights and learnings from somebody who's been from an agency to client side, back to agency, and then back to client side e-commerce. So lots of different perspectives on delivering good e-commerce strategies. So a warm welcome to Edward Scott-Finnigan, who's the head of e-commerce at University Law. Hey, Edward.
Hi, James. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to come on. And for those of you listening, Edward's been one of our longest term podcast supporters. So I'm delighted that we've got him on to talk about his e-commerce journey as well. So yeah, thank you for being such an avid listener and supporter of the podcast.
My pleasure.
And we were talking about this when just before we started recording. Edward and I worked together on a project a while back with a brand called Simprove, where Edward was agency side. I was consulting and Simprove was the client. And my ability to understand timelines in my life is so bad that it was actually only, I think you said it was only 5 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's crazy how that time has flown by. But I think if you allow me to lament a bit, being the youngest of three, one of the things my brother said to me is once you hit 30, it just all starts disappearing. And I think even like now at the ripe old age of 47, just those 5-6 years have just disappeared. But oddly, James, it's interesting because I can go back to that project and it feels like yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. So can I. I almost have no memory until I'm reminded of something, and then it all comes flooding back. So let's give our audience a flavour for who you are and what you do. So do you want to talk us through your e-commerce story, like where you've been, how you come to, and then what's brought you back to being client side rather than agency world? Yeah, cool.
So as I said to you, I don't want to sort of make this podcast about 7 hours long. Nobody wants that. But I very much fumbled my way into e-commerce. I grew up in Suffolk, which right in the middle of nowhere, and at that time probably didn't appreciate the beauty that I lived in. But it was an hour and a half any direction to get to any civilization. But I was very technology focused and ended up working for a systems integrator that was big in government utilities and telcos. And I was at the time sort of supporting BDM. I was knocking down doors, but learning my craft at that point. And you and I can both remember those times when there were only 4 channels on the TV and not everyone had internet at home. But Amazon was still only selling books. But we worked on this fascinating project with O2, which was one of our big clients. So I was up and down from Suffolk to Leeds quite often. But they were having you pay as you go phones. Everyone was having to go to the cigarette counter at the local supermarket and having to top up the prepaid cards. And one of the clever bods at O2 and our technical director at the time said, why don't we do this online? And that was the key point where I was like, okay, e-commerce, that's actually something that can actually work. And it was a phenomenal project to be involved in. But even, just to think now that people used to go to droves to the supermarket to actually top up a prepaid card to then dial a specific code into your prepay mobile phone to actually get credit. I mean, what foreign idea is that right now? But it was, how can we digitize that journey? And I think the interesting thing from that perspective and that key project, and what made me a bit of a tech nerd, was I had true insight and overview of what went on behind the scenes. So we were a systems integrator. So for us, even though websites were quite new at that time, the back end development was the big part of it. And it was fascinating sort of seeing, just the impact of one system to another, to another, to another, and how that relates. And that's where my e-commerce journey began. That e-commerce journey has seen me move from the UK to Germany, work for what is probably the biggest music retailer, actually they can say, in the world. When I was working for them, they were in hundreds of millions. Now they're into the billions, and that's a company called Music House Tommen. I headed up their international e-commerce division. And I don't want to carry on through my entire CV career. I hope I'm not applying for another job here, but I think one of the things that I've always enjoyed is the project side. And what got me into agency was it kind of I saw it as an absolute dream. I can have all these wonderful projects that I can work on all the time. And to some degree that's true, but my personal approach is I have a very custodial approach on any of the projects or any of the digital properties that I've worked with. They are, sorry to be cheesy, they are my babies. I care about them. I want them to be the best. And I think what I've learned from agency side is, it's exciting to get to work with these companies, to build relationships, to network, to see the vision, be a key part of that journey. But it's almost, I put it in these terms. I'm a bit of a car guy, but imagine building your perfect car, and the moment you're handed the keys, someone takes them off you, gets in the car and drives off. And I think that to me has always left me, you have that launch excitement, that project go live excitement, which is awesome. But then for me personally, there was a little bit of but I want to join that. I want to keep going. I want to see where it can go. And I think that's where my growth mindset is not being fed, because I'm always like, okay, now's the next part. We've got the foundation. Let's build, let's grow. Let's see where this rocket can go. And I think that's what brought me back to client side. I've done consulting, and again, similar story, but being client side allows me to grab onto a brand, to build a future, to sort of see where things could go. And I think I've learned important lessons from both sides of the sort of coin, but I think I'm at my happiest client side.
Yeah, I find this really interesting because I've been a consultant for 16 years. I was previously agency side and client side before that. And the mindsets are different, and the cadence of work is very different. You're right. And actually, one of the hardest things I've found as an independent is, because I get very emotionally vested in the projects I work in, because I care. I might be able to be flippant when things go wrong, because that's just the way you have to destigmatize the challenges we face with technology and people. But I genuinely care, and I will do my utmost to make sure a project's successful. And if there's any issues, I kind of take it personally as well. But I've had to teach myself to disconnect at the end of projects, because it is quite an intense thing, isn't it? When whether it's a replatforming or it's a large launch of something else, there's a real emotional build-up as you hit launch period.
And I think, but one of the things that is invaluable, and a lesson that I've learned from being a consultant or being agency side, whilst the emotion is important and it's invaluable, being sort of outside that in the early doors gives you a real good understanding of being able to pinpoint what is the reason, what is the real reason, what is the purpose of this project. Usually you're fed, because we want to hit X revenue goal in 5 years, or we want to move into this new market because it's the age old, if we have 1% of their GDP, suddenly we'll all be billionaires. But I think, being agency and consultant, you can sit there and you can take yourself out of the noise and go, you can quickly come to the real purpose behind any of these projects, whatever it may be. And I think it's a key lesson that I wouldn't have been able to evolve if I'd been purely client side the whole time.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, that was one of the key questions I had for you is because I've spoken to lots of people who've been in different roles, people who've been in the same type of role all their lives. And I guess that chimes to me, the thing that I perceive of benefit, having worked with so many different people, not working full-time in one organization, is as well, whilst I might be emotionally invested in projects because I want to be successful, I have that ability to just step out and be objective about why are you doing this and why do you do things like this, and is this really the right way of doing it? I think it's very hard when you're embroiled in the day-to-day into the politics and the ways of working to be able to step back and challenge it so objectively and say, okay, great, you do things like that, but that's not actually an optimal way, and there are more efficient ways of doing it. Have you got some specific areas where when you've come back to client side of university law, where those skills you've developed in an agency world have really come home to roost?
Absolutely. I think, so University of Law, you can tie back our origins to over 150 years. And we've been a charity, we've been a college, we're a university by name, but we're not classed as a university by government regulations, because we have there's no beds for anyone to sleep in, and there's certain areas. So we're a university, but it's kind of pseudo university. But the way we've grown is through acquisition, and we've been transferred through differing operating parties. So I think education for me was, I came to University of Law as a consultant, and I was very upfront and so I've got no idea about education. I've never sat in this side. But I think the way I've been able to model the University of Law and its output is, as I say, it's kind of like a brand manufacturer. The systems, I say, the transfer of data. Yes, you can call, the course as a product. We create those products. We market those products. So I think being able to work across multiple channels, verticals, whatever you want to call them, and understand that there is a structure that works across a lot of businesses, irrespective of your vertical. And I'd say, being able to ask that avid 3-year-old question of why, and be very, very forefront about why are we doing, what is the purpose, and then really, when you're doing any due diligence, consultant or agency side, the most important value you can have to any project is really understanding the why. I don't want to sound all Simon Sinek. I don't want to sound all cheesy and LinkedIn title, but there is a purpose behind everything that is not written in the requirements document. And I think that I wouldn't have that questioning ability. I wouldn't have that understanding. I wouldn't be, really to get down to the nitty gritty, because as you rightly said, it's once you understand, if I put it to a recent project, there was discussion on our main site about should we move to a headless front end. But why? What is it? And I'll save you the laborious meeting feedback, but it came back to what is the real requirement here? It's actually autonomy to do what the teams need to do within the main site. It was nothing about, it was just suggested, well, for us to achieve this autonomy, we have to absolutely move from an on-prem solution to a highly technically functional cloud front end. And it was just like, no, that's not the why. It's that we can deliver that autonomy for a lot less hassle, a lot less budget, and a lot less time frame. But if you looked at the requirements document, anyone would just look at it and go word for word, yeah, no, they need a headless front end without an absolute. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it is, and it's this is one of the things I love about doing discovery sessions, of really probing into what's driving the decision. What's the commercial driver for it? Is it about saving money? Is it about operational efficiency? Is it about greater speed to market? What are all those drivers of success? And what does success look? Because you have to come back to what does success look like, right? Because you could taking that use case, and I've been in other projects where people talked about wanting to move to like headless CMSs and to unpick one or two challenges, but what's the benefit to the business? Or can you actually live with a slightly slower process because the cost of moving is going to give you very little impact to have those benefits? But it leads you on to a question, actually, because you've got what always struck me about when we worked together on that project, when you were agency side, was that you have a strong technical knowledge and understanding. So you're not just on the commercial side, you really like to get into the detail about how the technology works, for how it's going to deliver on business needs. I'd love to hear your perspective now. You're back in client side, you're running an e-commerce operation. The technology landscape's changed massively in the last 5 years. Business challenges are pretty tough right now. So from a tech leadership point of view, what current challenges do you think heads of e-commerce have when looking at their technology stack?
It's interesting because I could go to a real deep layered onion of different verticals, but if I stand back a bit, and I'd say I'm going to pinch one of your sayings, and that's technology evangelism. I think confusion is probably the key moniker. I think you're right. Right now, we had a torrid time last year, and I say we, the e-commerce community, and we were warned that 2025 was going to be even more challenging. And it was interesting. In the beginning of the year, IMRG were forecasting massively down, but oddly, it looks like we're a couple of % up year on year. But it was a pretty awful year last year. And I think, the true leaders last year, beauty, fashion, they're having a real hard time right now. So I could get really specific, but I think one of the key, it is confusion. It is looking to the shiny thing. It's looking towards, there's not one solution that's going to fix all. If you don't have a strategy in place, then I'm sorry to say you're probably already losing. But it's understanding that long-term strategy and it's being able to react. But that it's very hard at the moment when you're being presented lots of flashy options. Dare I say it, that 2 letters that we're in an interesting bell curve at the moment. I think every product manager in the world has gone bonkers in the last 3 months and said, we've got to include AI within our product. And if we don't, we're losing. But I think it's an interesting discussion because it's, if we go back to the noughties, we were talking about personalization. We're now in 2025, the back end of 2025, we're still talking about personalization. I think AI is incredibly important, but it's just being led as a solution for all now. And I think that's that distraction from your strategy, that shiny new thing. And I'm not beating up anyone in the e-commerce field. People are really struggling now and they're finding it harder than ever. And, if you look at LinkedIn, you could be swayed by your opinion hourly on what the right route to do. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are confused right now. And I think there's, with your sessions with Paul, when you're talking about the landscape and you're talking about the amount of replatforms, if I go back to the old name of Inside Commerce, it shows that there used to be a lot more replatforms happening. There's not so many at the moment. And I think that's proof that there's confusion. People are having a torrid time. I'm not saying it's disastrous, but it is challenging. The old methods aren't working as good as they used to. We can't just throw more money at the wall and expect it to rebound like things used to. But I think that confusion of what direction to go in, what technology to use, the belief in this platform will solve everything. Again, going back to one of your key monikers, that technical evangelism of this platform will solve all your woes. If you join us, everything will be better. When you look up the chain of command, it's very easy to see why senior execs or company owners might go, actually, yeah, I see all my peers on that platform or using this system or whatever. That is our goal. That's what we'll use. Where it might not be, and you might actually not see that immediate impact when you go live, it might take you another 12 to 18 months to propagate that kind of revenue expectation you were looking for. And how can you survive within that period? So a long-winded way, but to answer your question, but I do think one of the key challenges right now is confusion on which route to go, because those tried and tested methods are proving not to work as they once did.
Yeah, the biggest change for me is as much as I hate the terminology sometimes because it gets misused, but composability in commerce is completely the right strategic direction, because it's about building flexibility into ecosystems so that you're not wedded one system to another, so that if you need to change one part of the stack, you don't have to redevelop everything, every interface, every API. That to me that's the evolution we're in now, right? Where some are further ahead on that. They've gone for a big investment and they've like literally done a big lift and shift and they've rebuilt entire systems landscapes, versus others who have bought into one part of it. Maybe they put in a Shopify or a BigCommerce, whatever it might be, a Centra. You pick your platform that's got a good open API, and they're in phase one of their evolution. But yeah, the point you make is really salient, which is that when you move your core e-commerce platform, you will fix some problems. You will introduce some benefits and improvements and often agility, but you will definitely find compromises, and you'll definitely find unforeseen issues that even the smartest agencies, consultants, e-com leads don't know about, because every project is unique. And every project I've been on, there will be an unknown that hits in at some point, and the impact of it is small, medium, high, depending on where in the like operational processes it sits.
You're absolutely right, and I think that I've always said, I don't know if you've had this. So like, if I have to explain to my mum what I do, she just smiles at me. And when I say e-commerce, it's interesting now because e-commerce is such a varied title and it means many things to many different people. But I think one of the ways I've been able to translate my role is that I'm all about shifting pain. And I think it's key to what we do is once you grow another area, once you fix an area in a problem in or a challenge in one area, you are shifting that pain onto another system, onto another department. And I think that's why I've always said that the three pillars of what I believe e-commerce is about is technical, commercial, and operational. And if you look imagine a Venn diagram, and then you're seeing that revolving circle. If you are growing, if you are putting pain onto each of those three areas, and you look at the key systems that revolve around those areas, and I think that's what makes me quite excited. It's okay, I understand is if I do something good here, I'm going to have to impact in these areas. I'm going to have to budget for these areas, whether that be people, process, systems, and it's a revolving circle. And I think that's helped me immensely when looking at like launching in different countries, because like, okay, you really have to look at that knock-on impact. And as simple as I can put it is, how much pain am I going to give to the next person once I make this change?
Yeah, I like that. That's always a good one, isn't it? What problems am I going to cause, and how do I manage around them? How do you? I have interest. How do you make sense of the tech? You touched on AI just a minute ago, and we're going to come back to it in a minute about your adoption of the university law. But like tech, the fragmentation of the tech space is insane. Like the number, thousands of technology options. You've got e-commerce platforms, specialist apps, like all-in-one platforms. There's so much out there, and I know you listen to the podcast, so thank you for doing that. And there are lots of other amazing podcasts out there. But how do you make sense? Like, what are your go-to sources of information that you think are credible and give you practical advice on what tech's good for what?
I think network is above all, and I think I, like many people, have made the mistake of when you get into LinkedIn, it's all a vanity bubble of how many connections you can get. And then you realize, why is this person in my feed, and why am I trying to, it's another inspirational leadership quote, that how much is that giving to me? So I have done the, sifting of who I follow on LinkedIn to see real guidance. I do find white papers quite a challenge because they're coming out thick and fast. You can have 3 or 4 in your inbox in a day. And when you look at that white paper, it can be 20, 30 pages long. I can say ebooks are, not ebooks, any of the big sort of books that are produced they look great, but then to find the time to sit down and really, really invest in that content, personally, I find quite challenging. So this is why I really do tune into a lot of e-commerce podcasts. I think Chloe does an amazing job. She has nicknamed me the what was she called me again? The podcast connoisseur. But I just think that they're invaluable. The information. What I find very good about yourselves, Chloe, is it's real world people talking about real world solutions. It's not a forced demo that's being sponsored and has some commercial expectations at the end of it. It's really, this is is it the chap from Matalan? I think you've had him on twice. He did both of those sessions were just, this is real pain within my industry being bled out, and actually this is our problem. This is what we tried. It worked for X amount of time. We came back to the drawing board. We tried again, different approach. And I think those are the sort of sources that I really gravitate to because they're speaking my language. It's almost like, I don't care about the systems used. I don't care. I actually want to see what is the problem and how you looked at what is the it's like, say if my mate says to me, I just drove this new Audi. I respect his opinion more than I do of the big, car reviewers, because he can give me a real world view of what it's like actually sitting in the traffic going to Exeter in the morning rather than hooning it around a track or around the Italian mountains, because that's not the life, unfortunately, I live. And I think similarly, when I can hear from real world use cases, I think it's something that you and Chloe do incredibly well. Across, there is across the pond, I do have an interest in, I think it's one of the interesting things. I've never launched within the US, and it's one of my, I've done APAC, I've done Europe, but never hit the US market. And I think, the likes of Rick Watson and Vinny O'Brien are incredible resources, just because I'm a bit of an e-commerce geek and I like to know what's going on over the pond. And Vinny comes very much from an eBay and marketplace background. But they're sort of news, hot topics that are going on, who's buying who's investing in who, which is a general interest of mine. But I'd say my main sources are the people that you bring in, and also Chloe and the guests that she has on.
Yeah, there's nothing like hearing of how people have done something, and what the bits I love is like, what were the challenges, what went wrong, how did you handle it? Because we all know it. Like when you work with technology and people, it's flawed. We're all flawed, and nothing's perfect, and that's great. And trying to pretend everything's perfect is not sensible or productive. But it kind of leads me on to the next question, which is, let's flip to your current role. Like universities typically have old legacy tech stacks.
Yep.
And how you've come in, you're heading up ecom at a time when there's like great modernization of technology happening, and the pace of change is exponential. How are you tackling modernization? Because going into a legacy stack and just going, right, we're going to rip it all up is just not feasible or practical. We both know it. It takes a much more nuanced approach.
No, and I think so. The University of Law, we're nearly like 2,000 people across several campuses. We have a lot of sister companies as well that operate under our banner, and we are behest to a big holding company as well, which adds its own pressures. But you're right. I think if you look at MarTech on its own, then I'd say when I joined, we'd signed up Adobe Commerce. It was the first step to dismantling that sort of big monolith and taking sort of moving to more of a cloud infrastructure for MarTech systems alone outside of the university, main monolith architecture. And again, as I said earlier, if you think of us as a brand manufacturer and the way we've grown through acquisition, again, you're absolutely right. Lots of legacy systems, but you think just the systems because even I said that we're not classed as a traditional university, we do have to report back to the government. We do have to report on how students are doing, where they are at any one time, especially if they're on national visa sponsorship. So if you think of those systems and our own internal IT team, which is substantial, but it's whether it's ERP, student information, the actual platforms that students access for library, for actually taking the course, for engaging on the online campus, to actually gaining access to the specific rooms that they have to within each campus that we have. It is, I'm fortunate that I don't have responsibility for all that, but there is a process of decoupling us from the whole MarTech infrastructure, which is slow, but I think slow on purpose. I think it's, with the amount of data that we're funneling from any one point, if you think of the engagement points that a student might have, whether we meet them at a show or they come to a webinar or they go onto the site, or whether they come back to another more personal webinar as a one-to-one or it's a phone call, when you're looking to take a master's degree, it's not like you're deciding to, well, I'll spend that money tomorrow. And then, it's how you gain access to them in the application. Fortunately, within the e-commerce and what I'm responsible for, which is probably about 4 or 5% of the university's overall product catalog, it's a much simplified journey, but still the multiple touch points are there. So I think right now, if I give you an example, yes, we're looking at connecting that entire MarTech infrastructure. But right now, one of the biggest projects that we're undertaking in the university is deploying a new ERP. And we're trying to do that in under 2 years, which is in itself optimistic. But I think the planned go live date is February next year. So it might be actually 28 months instead of 24 months. But that's actually resolving over 60 disparate systems into 2 platforms. And that is a huge process to be involved with. And it's becoming, it's even how we, so a lot of the systems that, for example, when a student books on the e-commerce side, that is then, I'm not saying calling it an absolute dumb client, but then we do that handoff to those internal systems that will look at, okay, how do we prove this person's identity, especially if they're international? How do we have an online enrollment form? And again, that pain process and how that gets updated and how we're going to better that whole process whilst taking over 60 systems into 2 is being a fascinating. I'm just, I can stick in my e-commerce bubble and be very happy playing in the MarTech space. But when you move into this larger infrastructure, I can only just sit back and admire and sort of have that classic wow face, because it becomes incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah, that's really, it's the ERP bit is the fundamental decision, isn't it? And to be honest, 24 months to 28 is good for an ERP, because
it's phenomenal.
I've seen projects shift by 18 months. I've even seen somebody walk away from a project after 12 months because they feel like it's not going to do it. But now looking at the more modern parts of the tech stack, and you touched upon AI earlier, and right, the industry's obsessed, and there's a lot of evangelism out there about how if you don't become an AI-driven business in the next few months, you're going to be obsolete, which is utter nonsense. So not looking at what other vendors are doing with AI that you might be investing in their platforms, but What is your approach to the adoption of AI internally, as in tools you might use in your team for like productivity and efficiency?
So there's two sides of this, really, isn't there? There's, I mean, look, I find AI fascinating. I really do. I think I've gone from being fearful to being, I guess, I would say I honestly use AI maybe for 4 out of 5 days a week. And that can come from very different reasons. So if I look at how we're using it, we're a Microsoft company. So we get Copilot out of the box, which is effectively an older version of ChatGPT. So that's great for, I've got to say, when you're facing a ridiculous inbox after a week away, and you can just use Copilot to identify those quick answer emails, and also how you can use it to summarize long chains. I cannot tell you, we're still living in a world where everybody wants to CC everyone else. And then once you get it copied in on a 20-stage email, oh, please just summarize this for me. It's fantastic. So I think for convenience, for catching up, I think, I personally use ChatGPT, a paid version, which, again, if I'm looking at AI as a supporting tool to help me do research, to help me even build like job descriptions. I've used it for SEO text. I've helped it produce new product page content. And I think I'm doing a presentation next week with Adobe, and being able to create a presentation quite quickly, build a structure, but more importantly, not rely on our internal design team to make me some silly images, or just edit some basic images that are good enough for a PowerPoint presentation, is a major win. I think people are getting confused at the moment because they're saying, oh, it's just going to take away all of this work. I think if that's a company's way of thinking, they're going to fail pretty quickly. And I read some statement, I think it was Brent, is saying like, and one of these big AI companies that I actually do training with, they're saying like 87% of all AI initiatives currently fail. And I think because they're trying to do adoption at mass, they are drinking the Kool-Aid. They're saying, okay, I can just replace an entire operation. No, it can support and speed up, and probably supplement. Again, if I don't have to tie up someone within our design team to make me a graphic, I can actually do a basic graphic that my small brain can actually conjure up in my mind. That's good enough for me, but I don't have to then go into a process of booking that in and taking an hour of someone's time. I think that's fantastic. And I think those general tasks to help me work quicker and not rely as much on other agencies, great. But then if we look at the flip side, we've been using AI for quite some time. We've used AI within, to replace, purpose-built integrations. So, for example, the way our finance team look at daily reports, we have a bot that actually looks at a daily reconciliation export that can actually pick and map those details from a customer and apply it to our finance system. So rather than having to pay people to sit there and copy and paste out of a daily reconciliation sheet, we just have bots running it. And also we haven't had to then build some, very expensive and laboring integration for such a simple process. So that for me, I see those sort of things invaluable, and I think there's going to be better, but I still think AI in itself has to be seen as a supporting matrix. It is there to help you. But I saw something the other day. They were saying that, I don't know if it's a LinkedIn naysayer, but they evaluated people using AI in like, I don't know if it was FTSE 100 or the big US companies, but they're saying even though people felt they were more productive, it was actually slowing them down because they were having to review the output of AI in much more granularity because they knew they couldn't trust the output without human intervention. And I think, again, we are the world of product marketeers and platforms, that their job is to sell you a service, so make it look more attractive. And I think that's where we are on the bell curve, that everybody has to be flashing and talking about it. But once you actually get over the fear of using it, because I still believe there is a lot of fear out there, and there are a lot of fear mongers on LinkedIn itself. But when you see the value and how it can be applied in your day to day, it can take a lot of the mundane tasks and deal with them quite quickly, or it can speed up. But I think it's one to watch, but it's not taking all our jobs as of tomorrow. And that's before you even talk to me about agentic.
There's an interesting report from the US. I'm trying to remember which big consultancy did it. And it was looking at what's the likely impact on the US labor force in the short, medium and long term of AI, because there is all this paranoia about we're going to lose loads and loads of jobs and AI is going to take over. And inevitably some jobs will go, some job roles will go. But they estimated short term, which is in the next couple of years, and the medium term, which is around 5 to 10 years, and long term 10 years plus, there'd be a initial impact, maybe 6% of the workforce where job roles would be replaced. But actually in the long term, it would be, I think it's around less than 1% long term loss because of AI, because actually roles are being repurposed. So what we're going to do is people are going to need to learn AI skills. And people are going to there's going to be more strategic roles, more thought-based roles, and more oversight roles rather than doing roles.
Yeah, no, 100% agree.
And I mean, that's definitely the conversations I have with people about is, but the most important thing is you've got to have a strategy and approach to AI rather than just, we're going to use it or not use it, but why? What is the reason around it? And how are you going to put governance into it? Because AI tools can, depending on how you use them, consume personal data, and therefore you've got compliance implications, and somebody's got to have a handle on this so that you don't get this wild west where hundreds of people in the business are all using lots of different AI tools without any coordination or control.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're 100% right. Again, this morning, it's quite poignant. We, our head of AI internally, we're actually trialing a closed model that does not look for any external references, but it is only being trained on University of Law data. Now, the first step of that, as infantile as it might sound, is creating an interactive intranet. So all of our policies across all of our departments, everything goes into one system and can be you can actually engage with it as a chatbot. So it's a central source of truth, but it's for all of those items that are purely for staff.
Yes.
So how many billions have gone into complex intranets that no one ever looks at? But actually, if we can put it in an engaging way, and I can actually say, what is University of Law's stature on maternity pay? What is the terms and conditions? How can I interpret these long documents about our terms and conditions? Actually, I can engage in a chat form, and probably that will evolve to a speech form. So that again, it's early doors, and it is very infantile, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's like, okay, that's actually a real good use of people's time, because you can think of all of the content that is being put into a company intranet that people don't really engage with. So when you're onboarding new people, it's fantastic. And I think slowly but surely you'll see things like that evolve, and then you could actually expand that to students accessing it. Saying, okay, what are the terms and policies that are pertinent to me as a student? How can I access that quickly rather than scrolling through millions of submenus? And can I actually, if you think of international students, how can I interpret, what is effectively a legal document in ways that I can understand? And I think, again, that's that's a very good use of AI that you can adopt very quickly, but understand the value in it.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of framing it. The internal use, I'm seeing this in a lot of the e-com businesses I'm working with, tooling to help people be more productive. Same principle as customer service agents that are automating inquiries from customers. Why wouldn't you do that internally? But let's kind of like a final question I got for you, which is like where you're headed, because we talked about the fact there's so much tech and that there are challenges in determining like tech stacks and roadmaps. How do you manage your roadmap? What does it look like? Like, what are the areas that are of most importance? You talked about the ERP project, marketing automation, but what are the areas where you're going to be really pushing on from a technology point of view?
So I think as much as cheesy as this might sound, but unification of MarTech infrastructure is incredibly important. If you think of, we have our core site, we have multiple core sites for our sister products that all feed into each other. We have the CRM, we have all our social media channels. And if you think those extend into student specific chat boards that are very important to us. And then you think of all of those student touch points again, understanding the journey of, what cohort, whether you're undergraduate, postgraduate, whether you're a business professional, how do you want to engage, not only in comms, but, face to face? Do you prefer online? Do you like our, in London campuses? Would you prefer to go out? All of those touch points are incredibly important to us to understand, okay, we have an immense amount of data that we can present to you, but how do we present it in the right way so you're getting what you need to answer the questions to make such a, you remember, it's always a big emotional investment in anything we do, which is why I come back to us almost being a brand manufacturer. It's that same sort of engagement. But for me personally in the e-com world, we went through a big replatforming, we replatformed the front end. I came in, we were very much in a proof of concept mode. We learned a lot. We then moved to a Hoover front end, which has been a dramatic improvement for us. Not only is it visually moving on from a proof of concept to something that more represents our brand, but it's given us a new foundation to sort of say, okay, we are dealing with students now, and it's very much a singular student concept, but then we are also engaging very much B2B, and that could be from small 2-3 person legal outfits in Exeter, or it could be internal legal departments at some of the biggest companies across the world. And I think where we're going to be evolving in the future is very much moving into the next stage. Probably next year will be the beginnings of our B2B e-commerce operations, because we're trying to amalgamate a lot of our disparate silos of companies that we've acquired over the years, and they haven't yet been brought into the fold. But I think B2B is one of the biggest areas that we're focusing on, because we see that demand right now. For example, just something simple as a payment method of, okay, we define them as firm sponsored. So a student comes to us and said, okay, my company wants to pay that for me, invest in my future, but they don't want to use a credit card. Absolutely. But we'd actually have to build that into our checkout method. How do we check the firm's real? How do we know they're VAT registered? How do we know, and also, I think the future of our e-commerce operation is not only to simplify things for students, but also to feed the engine of University of Law, because you might be starting as something simple right now and you might be undergraduate, but we'd like to cultivate your career with you when you feel ready, and also market to you at those particular times. So when you're seeing where students are in their journey, and especially whether they're just rocking up to us and doing it out their own pocket, or we have larger firms engaging with us, there's a great cultivation engine there for the larger organization that can work in tandem with student wishes and where they want to take their career.
So just a few small things to work on then.
Yeah, one of two. I hope they'll keep me around for a while, but I think it's for someone that has never put their toes in education, and I still don't fully understand it. But one of my biggest fears and probably one of my biggest learnings is, I've worked across a multitude of industries, and I think, you'll echo this working with a multitude of clients. You don't just stick with beauty. I've seen your portfolio and it's as diverse as any, but you can apply those fundamentals of e-commerce and you don't necessarily have to understand the concept of the brand, because there are so many tangibles that are equal from brand to brand to brand. And I think that's why I've been able to apply here. I think one of the things, I'll leave you with this. When I joined, I asked our marketing director, I said, "Are we seasonal?" And he went, "No." And then I looked at the how we are, and we're very much, again, if you think of us as a luxury brand manufacturer, and we have a spring, summer, and an autumn, winter, and then our autumn, winter is always our biggest intake. And our Black Friday is clearing. So if you think of that, I've always looked at, what are people doing? Why would they come to us? Why are we going to have our low points? And I think everybody's seasonal. And I think that's one of the things I just keep coming to the fact that we are there are so many commonalities between the brands that I've worked with that it's allowed me to migrate very easily, but get quickly up to date on the product and the whys, but the same technological fundamentals apply irrespective.
Yeah, the importance of politely challenging preconceived notions, I think, when you come in is essential. I've really enjoyed it, and as you said at the start, chats at 3 hours on this stuff quite happily. But for those listening, if anyone who's working in e-com wants to reach out, wants to check on a few more things or exchange views, I know you always have to talk about e-com. What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, by LinkedIn as always. I'm not one of those guys that puts myself out there. I'm happy to chime in, and especially if there's something I'm passionate about. But if you ever want to grab a coffee or just say hello, LinkedIn's always the best. Or if any of you are going to this big e-commerce show in a couple of weeks in London, I'll be there. But please, no salespeople.
There you go, nice and clear. I'll leave for those of you listening on our landing page on the website. You can there's a link to Edward's LinkedIn profile as well. Look, Edward, really glad we set up this session. Really enjoyed it. It's great to hear the next stage in your e-com journey.
I'll be excited if I can come back for a part 2 for our B2B journey.
Oh, interesting. There we go. He's teasing people for the future. All right. Well, look, lovely to chat as always. Thanks to everybody for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And have a great day, Edward.
And you, James. Take care.
Bye.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.